So whether you've been in kayak fishing for a while or you're brand new to it, one of the key things about taking care of your kayak and making sure that it's gonna last you a long time, and honestly, it's an investment, you should wanna take care of it, is gonna be how do you store that kayak? So today, we're gonna go over just a few options that you have, and I'm gonna show you specifically what I did for my kayak to make sure that it lasts as long as it can, it's properly stored, and I save some room in my garage. As we talked about in the intro, one of the things you need to take into consideration when you have your own kayak is how are you going to store it? Some people have garages, some people don't have garages, some people have very limited space. It's all really depending on your situation. There's a few different options that you have. Lately, a lot of people love to buy or make trailers for their kayaks, and that's pretty much how they store them. And honestly, that is not a bad idea. One of the bigger issues with that is it can get expensive, especially when it comes to customizing that trailer or even just the licensing process depending on what state you live in. Me personally, I have a pickup truck, so I am perfectly fine just having a bed extender on the back of my truck like you've seen in some of the videos before and loading it up that way. But one of the more annoying things, if you're especially storing your kayak on the ground, is going to be actually getting that kayak up on the truck. Not to mention, it is not good for your kayak to be stored on the ground. The reason why is because ultimately kayaks are plastic, and especially if you live down in a very hot region, I live personally down in the south, that plastic in the heat, warping and molding, whatever the case may be, I may not have the proper perfect words for it, but essentially it can alter the shape of that kayak. And especially if you have something like a Hobie or any other expensive kayak that you bought, you don't want to be messing around when it comes to the structure of that kayak and really letting things go to waste. Mind you, my neighborhood is kind of a woodworking neighborhood, so if you hear some saw noise in the background, I apologize for that. So today what I want to do is show you a cheap and easy way, and mind you, it doesn't have to be cheap. It can be as expensive as you want, but pretty much on how to store your kayak, so that way, one, it's stored properly, two, you have more space, and three, it's easier to load, especially if you have a pickup truck. All right, now as you see here, and don't mind my messy garage, but this is essentially what I made for my kayak to go ahead and store it up on. Basically, what you're looking at is honestly just a bunch of 2x4s with some cheap lumber on the bottom to go ahead and make a shelf. And the beauty about this is you can do this pretty much with any type of wood that you have laying around. You can go super expensive with it, you can go super cheap. I personally added wheels so that way I can move it around real easy. But we're going to go over all that so that way you can optimize the storage of your kayak, the safety of your kayak, and save some room in the garage. All right, well, let's go ahead and break down this build a little deeper so that way you have an understanding when you want to build your ramp exactly how you want it. Before we get crazy into it, let's go over the tools that you are going to need in order to make this simple build happen. First and foremost is going to come the materials itself. For this build, I simply used cheap 2x4s and some regular, I don't even know what you're going to call this type of wood, pretty much stuff that looks like it's for fencing or anything like that. Pretty much the cheapest stuff that I could find at Lowe's. And that's really all the wood that you are going to need, unless you want to do something fancier. Once again, this is the bare minimum. Next, for building material itself, you're going to need some PVC pipe. I personally bought some that was already pre-cut at 5 foot long, and it's about 3.5 inches in diameter. Now, mind you, you don't have to go that big. This is typically the most expensive part of the build because PVC pipe can get expensive depending on where you're buying it, but you can go smaller in diameter. You don't have to go that big. Pretty much look at the bottom of your kayak and see how that shape is of your kayak and how it's going to fit in. Don't be afraid to do a little trial and error. The main point of that PVC pipe is to, one, fit onto the bottom of your kayak, those two areas where it is beveled, and then the other point is to keep it off the platform itself. Next, you will need something to cut that wood, whether it be a manual hand saw, which I don't know too many people have those. I personally use this circular saw right here, real cheap. This is electric, it's not even battery powered. Or if you got something better, a miter saw, by all means use that, but you will need something to cut the wood with. Now you don't have to go this route. I did personally with me because it's fun. I went with a hammer and some very long, thick nails for those 2x4s. Now you don't have to do that, like I said. You could totally go the drill and screw route. Just make sure you get some screws that are big enough to get through those 2x4s. Speaking of a drill, you will need a drill eventually during this build, even if you decide to go the hammer route, and that's mainly to get the PVC pipe on the platform. And I'll explain that as we actually go along. And make sure you do have a drill bit to drill into that PVC pipe. And lastly, you are going to need a tape measure. Make sure you have something so that way you can make even cuts. That's very, very important. As they always say in woodworking, measure twice, cut once. So now that we've gone over the building materials, the tools, let's get into the build itself. And once again, this is a super simple build. Anybody with limited, almost no knowledge of woodworking can get this done. So for the build itself, the very first thing you want to do is get the wood that you're going to need, but have in mind how long do you want this to be and how wide you want this to be, because essentially that's going to kind of dictate how much wood you actually buy. And if you live far away from a hardware store, yeah, well, you might be making some trips if you don't figure this out beforehand. So the very first thing that you are going to want to build when it comes to this is going to be the frame. And what I mean by the frame is, not to insult anybody's intelligence, but is this outer piece right here, the pretty much frame of this, and then the inside pieces as well. And you're going to make two of them, one for the top and one for the bottom. You're going to make them the exact same size, the exact same cut, all depending on how long you want it. Personally, I think I did 60 inches for mine. And I wasn't trying to get fancy with this. I know you can do a 90-degree angle cut and try to make this look real good. I personally didn't go that route. I just wanted something that was going to be fast, easy, and effective. After building the frame, I then cut out the legs that I was going to use, which is what you see right here. These legs then go inside the frame, all at the same height, obviously, and then essentially you are going to nail them or screw them, depending on what you want to do, to the frame. And then once you do it to one part of the frame, I personally started with the top, I then nailed it and attached it to the bottom part of the frame. Now, if you couldn't tell already, the reason why I put these middle planks here, these middle 2x4s on the frame, was so that way it can hold the PVC pipe. And as you can see, it's pretty solid on there. Once your legs and frame are built and you have the PVC pipe ready to go, what you're going to need to do is take your drill and drill a hole down into the bottom. Now there's a couple different ways you could tackle this. My way may not be the best way, and there may be other ways to attach this PVC pipe to your frame, but at the end of the day, it is what you want it to be. And just to let you know, I've been using this for a while and it's pretty solid and it works great. So essentially what I did was I drilled a hole using my drill bit into the PVC pipe. I drilled all the way down to the bottom. I didn't go through the bottom. I then took a screw and my drill and screwed in the PVC pipe to the frame. I did this on each section of wood that I had to ensure, and then obviously I didn't do it on the very end because I actually came to find out that I made this a little bit longer than I intended to, but hey, that's the beauty of woodworking and also when you're just kind of hastily going through something. But one of the biggest things to take into consideration when putting these PVC pipes on your frame is making sure that it is the correct width. And what I mean by that is you need to go look at the bottom of your kayak and you need to check out these areas where there's the indents, these bevels, and you need to see how far away they are separated from each other. This is also another reason why you want to tape measure. Now this can be a little bit more difficult because you obviously, like me, I wanted to make sure that this PVC pipe was centered on the frame, and then I needed to make sure it was the proper spacing. And if you actually look down here, you can see one of the screws that I was talking about earlier that I used. I pretty much just used a flathead screw that would go ahead and hold that to the wood a lot better, so that way there wasn't much wiggling around. All that to say this, make sure your spacing is going to be the same spacing that you have on your kayak. And the beautiful thing about this is if you end up getting another kayak and it has different spacing, then by all means, go ahead and just unscrew out and then re-screw back into the new width that you want. It's one of the great things about one of these homemade products. Now lastly, the few things that I'm going to show you here are optional, mainly the tires, but the wheels that you see here. All right, so I added wheels to mine. You do not have to do this. You can go ahead and just keep it stable platform on the ground, pull your truck up to it. This would actually save you a lot of money because these wheels are not cheap, depending on what you get. Me, I got some wheels weighted for like 300 and some pounds because I didn't want my kayak falling down. Obviously, my kayak doesn't weigh that much, and all the stuff that I have on it shouldn't accumulate to that, but at the end of the day, I'd rather be safer than sorry. So these wheels ended up costing me around 20 bucks a pop, which is why I said between the PVC pipe and the wheels, that's the most expensive thing on this project. If you decided to just do no wheels, you're probably only dropping around 75 bucks on this whole project itself. Next, if you decide to do it, and you don't have to, but I wanted some extra shelving, was I got that cheap wood like I talked about, and I made just little shelving so I can go ahead and store stuff underneath this space. And that way I can free up a lot of space when it comes to my garage. Last but not least, obviously you see I have some things dangling from this. And the reason why is because why not? Go ahead, just nail some nails in, hang some stuff up. You can make it as fancy or as not fancy as you like. Like literally I said, I'm just using random nails that I had laying around. So with that being said, that is honestly this entire build. And as you saw, I went ahead and took the kayak off the cart. I'm going to show you how to put it back on. This is another reason why when you go look at your wheels, and I should have mentioned this before, you need to make sure that you buy wheels that have this right here, this on and off to go ahead and put brakes on. Otherwise, your kayak cart is going to be flipping around left and right when you try to move the kayak on and off your vehicle. Now, if you don't want to spend the extra money on getting the ones with the brakes, you can go ahead and do something like this and get a chalk block or whatever you can to go ahead and block those tires out. One last thing before we go, and this one's actually really important. Another thing that's really going to dictate this build is how tall do you want to make it. So when I originally started making this, and this is going to be a self-admitted mistake, I did not take an account for the wheels. I was actually just going to make a flat platform, and I never really cared to throw wheels on it. I thought about it, but I was like, nah, I don't need it. After I built it, put the kayak on, I'm like, man, wheels would be really, really convenient for this thing. So I put the wheels on, and it kind of messed up my height in relation to my truck. So make sure you actually take that in mind because it can add to some headaches, minor headaches at that, but some headaches for when you're loading your kayak on and off your vehicle, specifically back onto your cart after you've been out fishing all day long. Well, anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and load this up while y'all watch me, and this is pretty much the end of the video, but enjoy this demonstration. And if you did enjoy this video, by all means, please like and subscribe the channel. It really helps and motivates me, honestly, to keep making more videos. And if you have any suggestions for videos to make, whether it has to do with fishing, woodworking, whatever the case may be, because we kind of cover a lot of different things on this channel, please drop it in the comments and we will look into it. But anyways, y'all have a good one. This is Tim with Artillery Life, and enjoy this load up.